Välkomna till Timbros monter. Vi ska prata om boken Den gröna bubblan med Per Wimmer som har skrivit den. Varsågoda. Låt mig återkomma till boken. Men Per, du är ju finansman, driver en egen investmentbank och har liksom det finansiella perspektivet på de här energifrågorna. Men du kommer ju också, hoppas vi, att bli Timbros första astronaut nästa år. Kan du inte berätta lite om det till att börja med?
Yes, that's true. Next year is a big year for me. I'm going into space. I've got 3 trips to space lined up, and it's going to be a very, very exciting year. And I hope, hopefully, we can have a little bit of Timbro in space at that point. It's a project I've been working on for 14 years now, and it's going to be a personal peak, I think, in my lifetime.
Och en av de biljetterna har du köpt med Richard Bransons företag. Och Richard Branson har också skrivit förordet till den här boken. Hur kommer det sig?
Yeah, that's right. As part of the whole Virgin Galactic, I've gotten to know the Branson family quite well. So we're good friends today. And when I mentioned that I was writing about green energy, something that Richard cares a lot about, he was very kind enough to offer to write the foreword to my book. So I'm very pleased about that, and I'm pleased about Richard's mission.
Du nämnde det att Branson har ju ett starkt engagemang för förnybar energi, får man säga. Och du delar ju den bilden att vi behöver mer grön energi, eller hur?
Absolutely. I think the world needs more green energy. There's no doubt. However, the problem is the way it's done today is that everything that's green just gets a free check. And I think that's wrong from a business perspective. So in order to make green energy more sustainable, truly sustainable, the book argues that you need to make it more commercially sustainable so that there's a good business case for having green energy.
Så det räcker liksom inte att det finns de här miljöfördelarna, utan vi måste också ha en ekonomisk hållbarhet för att få långsiktighet.
Exactly right. It's all about sustainability. So if we can make green energy or certain parts of green energy more sustainable, it will take its own momentum through entrepreneurs, private people who will invest in the sector, as opposed to having to rely on public subsidies all the way. It's okay to have public subsidies for the first 4 or 5 years, but after that, it has to be standing on its own 2 feet. If not, it doesn't merit subsidies.
Och hur ser det ut idag då? Du bor ju själv i Storbritannien, vi befinner oss i Sverige. Om vi tittar i Europa generellt, hur skulle du beskriva att det ser ut vad gäller? Alltså är det på det här sättet att man har den här ekonomiska hållbarheten i åtanke, eller?
Unfortunately not. No, we're not looking so much at sustainability at the moment. It appears that politicians seem to think as long as it's green, it's okay. It's almost religion. So it doesn't matter what it costs, how long time it takes. As long as it's green, it deserves a big check. As a taxpayer, I think that's wrong. I think we need to change that and focus a lot more on those specific things that makes a lot of sense, such as hydro, such as nuclear, such as waste to energy, and such as certain solar projects. That's where we need to focus, instead of just wasting money across the board.
Och mer konkret så handlar det då om olika subventionssystem till förnybar energi av olika slag som löper under lång tid. Men den här gröna bubblan då, var kommer den in i bilden? Hur bidrar det här till att skapa en grön bubbla?
Well, I work in finance and based out of London, and what I saw during 2005-2006 was the build-up of what became the credit bubble, the real estate bubble. And I see some of the same tendencies today within green energy, that we are building a big bubble. It's some of the same people, some of the same instruments, some of the same techniques, financial techniques, to build up this green bubble. Green energy takes typically a lot of debt on board, up to 80%, just like real estate. And if you keep making subsidies and making those business cases depending on subsidies with a huge amount of leverage, that will eventually fall over, because somebody's going to get tired of supporting these projects all the time. And that's what I see, and that's the fear I have, and that's the alarm bell I'm sounding, that be careful, because we may just have the same kind of fallout like we had from the credit crunch.
Så vi blåser upp den här bubblan med subventioner och de är högt skuldsatta, stora lån och så vidare. Vilka risker ser du då, eller vad skulle kunna hända så att säga? Du pratar ju om att om räntorna går upp så kan vi få problem till exempel.
Exactly. The cost of capital will rise as the interest rate rises, and therefore suddenly what is maybe a marginal project that maybe take something like biogas, for instance. Sometimes they make 5% margins with subsidies. Suddenly your interest rate goes up, and that becomes a loss-making exercise. And then suddenly it starts faltering, and then that will lead to losses which the banks will have to carry. And the banks, we've seen what happened during the banking crisis. So there'll be a domino effect throughout, and that's what I'm afraid of.
Så det finns en risk att det inte bara blir de här företag som sysslar med grön energi som kommer att drabbas, utan även andra sektorer kan hotas av det här.
Absolutely, it will have a domino effect throughout the economy, and therefore this can be quite significant. Just like the credit boom and bust, because you had a high degree of leverage, a lot of debt in these projects. Same thing can happen with green energy, and that's why we have to be very careful on what we provide subsidies for and what we don't. And at the moment we're not doing it. We're just indiscriminately subsidizing everything, it seems, and that's wrong.
Men det här är en varningsklocka, säger du. Du varnar för att nu håller vi på att bygga upp den här gröna bubblan. Vad skulle du ge för råd då till politiker till exempel? Vad borde man göra istället?
I would say two pieces of advice. First of all, focus on those areas that makes a lot of commercial sense at the moment, like hydro, like nuclear, like waste to energy. Those are good areas where I think there's a lot of potential. So let's focus our dollars there. And secondly, take some of the other money from that people are subsidizing, wave energy or tidal energy, take that money, put it into the universities, and let them do all the research and development. Because if things fail, at least somebody would have learned something from it, and it would have benefited society.
Så det är bättre att så att säga använda de här pengarna i tidigare skede snarare än att subventionera ganska långt skridna projekt eller mogna tekniker?
Exactly, because if you're subsidizing, say, a wave energy project that's unlikely to be commercial until 20 years out, first of all, other investors will get very tired, and most likely that company will probably go bust before you reach 20 years. Whereas if you put the money into universities, at least other people can benefit from it, from a learning, and who knows, there might be some students who eventually break out and come up with some clever idea and they can start their own companies. But from a state point of view, it ought to subsidize the universities, not an individual company that is likely to go bust anyway.
För du pratar ju om att man borde ha en kortare tidshorisont, att om vi ska subventionera så kanske bara under 4-5 år eller något sånt där. Det är en ganska kort tid egentligen.
It's very short time from a state subsidy point of view, but it's actually a very long time from an investor's point of view. We typically have an investment horizon of up to 3 years. By that time we need to get our money back. So 4, 5, 6 years is actually quite long in the world of finance. But I think that's a fair balance. If the project can't stand on its own 2 feet within that time period, I think at that point it doesn't deserve subsidies. Then it has to go through the universities.
Och det betyder egentligen att ganska många av de subventionsprogram vi ser i olika länder i Europa är alldeles för långvariga helt enkelt.
That's right. That's right. So I think we need to pull back on some of the subsidies, reallocate into the technologies like hydro, like nuclear, that we know are going to work and we know are going to make a big difference. And if you really want to move the needle within green energy, make green energy a bigger part of our energy production, nuclear and hydro is the way forward.
Vem vill du ska läsa den här boken och vad ska de ta med sig? Liksom, vem har du skrivit den för?
I think this is a great book for everybody who cares about energy and green energy. It's also a great book for politicians because those tend to be the ones who don't care about how much it costs. It's more about the fact it's green than that's good enough. So I would say politicians, people in general, people with an interest for green energy or energy policies in general, I highly recommend reading it. It's not a technical book, it's not a specialized book, everybody can read it without any prerequisites.
Och du beskriver ju också i mycket olika energitekniker som du har kommit i kontakt med, i och med att du själv investerar och arbetar med företag som utvecklar de här.
Yeah, we do go into concrete examples of some of the cases we have worked with, some of the companies we had worked with, just to illustrate what can happen on a positive and on a negative way. So a lot of lessons learned. Day to day, I live in London and I do finance, and we do finance within green energy. So we have a lot of experience when it comes to financing green energy companies, what works and what doesn't.
Tack så mycket Per. Det var om den gröna bubblan. Jättespännande att höra. Tack så mycket.
Tack.